What's up, everybody? I am Brandon Lundberg with Football Scout 365, and today we have a national championship matchup to discuss between the Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies, set to kick off next Monday, January 8th. So before we discuss the head-to-head matchup between Michigan versus Washington, I do want to review how both teams performed in their semifinal matchups of the college football playoff, starting with Michigan, who defeated Alabama 27-20 at the Rose Bowl in a game that required overtime. And then we had the Washington Huskies, who defeated the Texas Longhorns 37-31 in a game that ended with some weird clock things going on at the end there. There was an injury to a player that had stopped the clock. It gave Texas the opportunity to get the football back where they would drive down the field. And inevitably, the game came down to the final play, but Washington prevailed at the end of that one. Now, statistically speaking, these games went about as expected, in my opinion. I expected the lower scoring game between Alabama and Michigan. I also expected it to be a defensive game decided by a handful of key moments. That is exactly how it played out, with the exception of the ominous start for Michigan, where they threw a pick on the opening play of the game that was overturned by illegal touching. Now, Michigan also had several uncharacteristic mistakes on special teams. They had muffed a punt in the first quarter that gave Bama a short field that led to a score and inevitably a 7-0 lead for Alabama. But at the end of the day, it would be the Michigan defense leading the way, holding the Alabama offense in check throughout the game. The Michigan defense, they recorded 5 first-half sacks. They had 7 total sacks in the game. The Michigan defensive line was a problem the entire game as well for the Bama offensive line. They racked up 14 pressures from the front 4 alone. The Michigan defense, they held Jalen Milroe in check. They didn't really allow him to take off a lot on scrambles. They did this by applying pressure and containing his ability to escape outside, and he only averaged 3 yards per rush attempt. Overall, Michigan held the Alabama offense to just 280 total yards. They rushed for 172. They threw it for 116. Alabama was 3 for 13 on third down. They went 0 for 1 on fourth down. As far as the Michigan offense is concerned, they had highs and lows throughout this game, but the mission was clear going into this. Michigan knew that they were going to have issues versus the elite Alabama corners. And I brought it up during the Rose Bowl preview episode that Michigan would have to find creative ways to attack the linebackers and the safeties in the passing game. Michigan deployed a lot of motion and shifts throughout the game to confuse the defense, and that opened up quite a few opportunities in the passing game. Michigan was also able to run the ball with great success, and this was just an absolute masterpiece of a game by Blake Corum, by the way. Now, Corum, he only had 83 yards rushing in this game. He scored 1 rushing touchdown. That would be the game-winning touchdown in overtime, by the way. But his biggest impact happened as a receiver, which was a major tendency breaker from the norm, where Donovan Edwards is generally the guy that they bring in to be the receiver out of the backfield. But Corum, he had 2 critical catches in this game for 35 yards and a touchdown as a receiver. Now, this was a game where Blake Corum was able to absolutely display his NFL traits, the contact balance, the vision, the ability to find the openings and the space in the offensive line and executing at a high level. I mean, he was playing top notch in this one. And to add in the ability as a pass catcher out of the backfield, that's a big deal on tape for Blake Corum heading into the 2024 NFL Draft. In the passing game, J.J. McCarthy completed 17 of 27 pass attempts. He had 221 yards. He had 3 touchdown passes to 0 interceptions, and Alabama was unable to sack him in this game. His efficiency rating was outstanding as well. McCarthy's progression during the game was marked by his ability to make plays consistently in critical moments, picking up key first downs through the pass game. He spread the football around effectively. This performance really underscores his ability to be a first rounder in the 2024 NFL Draft. He made key plays in the key moments. He wasn't perfect in this game. He was a little rusty coming off that month-long layoff, but he eventually got it going, and the rest is history. Michigan would beat Alabama, and J.J. McCarthy pretty much cemented his legacy as a Michigan football legend, him and Blake Corum as well. Now, as far as the Washington-Texas game in the Sugar Bowl, it also went as expected. They scored the over, combining for 68 total points. Washington did a great job setting the pace from the very beginning and just staying aggressive. They were led by their quarterback, Michael Penix, and a trio of elite wide receivers that were just making plays. Overall, Michael Penix, he threw for 430 yards. He had 2 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. He completed 76% of his passes on the night. Texas was just unable to affect Penix with pressure throughout this game. This was another key to the game that I spoke about in the Sugar Bowl preview episode. And by the way, Michael Penix, he's absolutely an elite quarterback. And if it were not for the past injury history, Michael Penix, he'd easily be a top 5 pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. And don't be surprised if a team decides that he is worth the risk within the first 10 to 15 picks of this upcoming draft. Michael Penix, to me, is very comparable to CJ Stroud. I know the left-handed throwing motion is a little awkward, but the accuracy, the decisiveness in the ball placement is excellent from Michael Penix. One of the other player comps that makes a lot of sense for me when it comes to talking about Michael Penix and his game is Phillip Rivers. Kind of a weird throwing motion from Phillip Rivers. I still stand by my Tua Tagovailoa player comp that I originally had on him, just based off of the ability to move a little bit more freely than like a Phillip Rivers, for example. But I do love Michael Penix's game. Overall, he's really starting to grow on me. He wasn't at first, but he's starting to grow on me a lot. I would not be surprised if someone takes a shot at him in the earlier part of the first round rather than the late first round, early second round. Now, as far as the Washington defense is concerned, they made enough key plays to win this game. In fact, the question leading into this game was which of these two teams could get enough stops to pull away. And on this night, it was the Washington Husky defense led by their fantastic edge rusher, Braylon Trice, who picked up 7 total pressures and 2 sacks in this game. He can be an absolute problem in the national championship game for Michigan. And in order for Washington to come out of this game victorious, he's going to need to be a problem against that Michigan offensive line. So that is the summary review of the semifinals. Let's talk about how Michigan and Washington actually match up. Now, in terms of scheduled teams leading up to this national championship game, let's discuss that a little bit. Michigan, they're 14-0. They have the nation's 18th toughest schedule according to ESPN FPI currently. They won the Big Ten title. They had key games versus Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State, all at the end of the regular season. They won all 3 of those games without Harbaugh on the sideline due to suspension. They dominated the Big West champ in the Iowa Hawkeyes to win the Big Ten championship. As for the Washington Huskies, they have the nation's 2nd toughest schedule, according to ESPN FPI. They have 2 wins against a very good Oregon team, 1 at home and 1 in the Pac-12 championship. Other key wins include USC, Utah, Oregon State, and Texas in the Sugar Bowl just this past week. One immeasurable aspect is that Michigan had to play its 3 toughest games at the end of the regular season without Jim Harbaugh due to his suspension. But Sharon Moore stepped in and led Michigan as the head coach for those 3 games, and Michigan didn't skip a beat. And with that said, I believe that's an immeasurable aspect that bridges the schedule strength gap between these 2 teams. All right, so I want to talk about the roster talent for each of these teams. Both teams are obviously talented, but the 24/7 Sports Talent Composite rankings say otherwise. Michigan, they are ranked 14th in total roster talent. I suggest you watch them on tape and then make a decision. But nevertheless, Michigan rosters only 2 5-star players, 3 if you count JJ McCarthy as a 5-star. Michigan rosters 45 total 4-stars, 38 total 3-star players. Both teams are doing a good job utilizing the transfer portal, as I already mentioned, to fill key needs. Both teams lean on developing these 3- and 4-star prospects into eventual 5-star players on the field. Another way to view a team's talent and development outside of a roster grade, by the way, from 24/7 Sports, is to examine each team's NFL draft talent on the current roster. Michigan could see upwards of 20 players drafted in the 2024 NFL draft, according to Jim Harbaugh himself. My actual count right now is at 14. Once the title game is over, we're going to find out if they can get to that 20 number based on the additional declarations from underclassmen who are eligible for the 2024 NFL draft. Now, I only have 1 first-round projection for Michigan in the 2024 NFL draft, and that is, in fact, JJ McCarthy at this point. And for the Michigan fans out there that are concerned about Michigan losing 40-plus seniors after this season, Michigan has more 2025 high-level draft talent on the roster than they do 2024 eligible draft talent currently on the roster. So keep that in mind. I can name 4 first rounders off the top of my head that are going to be draft eligible after the 2024 season. Michigan is just going to come back. They're not going to be as experienced, but they're going to have a lot of players, high-end talent and developed players. And they may not skip a beat at all, aside from losing JJ McCarthy and Blake Corum, which that's a huge drop off. But if they are able to keep Donovan Edwards, which I recommend Donovan Edwards go pro. I also recommend JJ McCarthy go pro. If both those guys come back, Michigan has enough talent currently on the roster to be the number 1 ranked team starting the 2024 college football season. So now, as far as the Washington Huskies roster talent, Washington, they have 0 5-stars. according to 24/7 Sports. They have 47 total 4-stars. They've got 49 3-stars. They are also an experienced team with 38 total players listed as a junior or a senior on the roster. Washington should at least have 9 players drafted in the 2024 NFL Draft. That would include 4 first-rounders, which also includes Michael Penix, Odunze, who both should be drafted in the first round. I believe they're both top 15 picks. Many people have Penix as a second-rounder, as I mentioned before. I do not share that same belief. The other guy is edge Braylon Trice, a true game changer and a top 20 draft projection. The fourth player could fall into the second round. That's offensive tackle Troy Fontenot. He would be an absolute steal in the second round of the NFL draft if that's how that goes down. So knowing what we know about the two teams in terms of the coaches, the schedule strength, and the roster talent, how can Michigan win and how can Washington win? For Michigan to win this game, they're going to have to capitalize on their experience. When people talk about how can Michigan handle this Husky offense, this defense experienced a CJ Stroud offense loaded at wide receiver in 2021 and 2022. The key for the Michigan defense is how they can pressure Michael Penix without sacrificing coverage on the back end. The goal in this game will come down to how you can move Michael Penix off of his spot. Texas tried it, and even when they were able to get some pressure, he sidestepped it to the tune of 0 sacks. Texas pressured Penix 14 times. He still completed 57% of his throws for 7.1 yards per attempt. Now, when Texas was unable to get pressure, he completed 88% for 14 yards per attempt. Amazingly, Penix was better against pressure versus Texas on the biggest stage than he was all season long. During the regular season, when pressured, Penix completed only 44% versus 74% without pressure. So he absolutely elevated in a massive way against Texas when the lights were shining the brightest. Now, the difference for Michigan versus Texas is going to be the secondary. Michigan has an excellent secondary, and their defensive scheme is far more intricate than Texas. Michigan's ability to play man-to-man with Will Johnson can afford Michigan the opportunity to send an extra defender to pressure Penix in key moments. So does that mean you go man-to-man with Odunze with Will Johnson? Do you sometimes double team Odunze with a corner and a safety combo and have Will Johnson play on an island opposite of Odunze on occasion? Will we get that heavier dose of Johnson versus Odunze? I'm hoping for the heavier dose. I want to see the matchup. I want to see how Will Johnson, who I believe is going to be a top 10 pick in the 2025 NFL draft, matches up with arguably a top 15 pick in this upcoming 2024 NFL draft at wide receiver in Odunze. Michigan, though, they mixed it up against Marvin Harrison in that kind of a way. They would double team him on one down. They'd go man-to-man the next with Will Johnson, and they had great success doing that. So I imagine Michigan may try to do that. They're not going to completely shut Odunze out. The ultimate goal is, can Michigan contain him enough? And then you have to figure out your plan versus McMillan and Polk, because this is a three-headed monster receiver, and they're all very, very good receivers, and they're all very, very good at getting on top of a defense and making plays down the field. So it is a steep mountain for the Michigan defense, but it's not Michigan's first rodeo against high-level wide receiver talent. Now, if Michigan can implement a similar game plan to what we have seen them implement against Ohio State with Stroud back in 21 and 22, and then McCord and Harrison in 2023, just think back to the 2021 Ohio State team. They had CJ Stroud, Garrett Wilson at wide receiver, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Fast forward to 2022, they had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. Michigan wasn't able to just shut them down completely, but they were able to contain them and limit the number of explosive plays, which is exactly how I see Michigan defending this explosive Washington offense. In fact, this is a strength of this Michigan defense. The Michigan defense ranks second in the nation at preventing 20-plus yard explosive plays. I believe this is going to be the ultimate key against this Washington pass offense, which ranks second nationally in creating 20-plus yard explosive plays this season. And against Texas, Washington just bludgeoned that secondary. They had 9 passing plays of 15-plus yards or longer. 6 of those went for 20-plus. 2 went for 50-plus. You just have to minimize this aspect of the Washington offense if you are going to beat them. If Michigan can do this on defense, forcing Washington to sustain longer drives, they can get Washington into a condensed red zone where the game could come down to their ability to score 6 instead of 3. The Michigan defense, they rank 5th nationally, by the way, allowing teams to score a touchdown on only 44% of their red zone opportunities. That's going to be a tremendous aspect in this game. So it's all going to come down to Michigan's ability to limit explosive plays, get pressure on Michael Penix, not allowing him to sidestep that pressure and make elite level throws like he did against Texas. Penix, he's going to find that second and third read if you cannot get a body on him and get him to the ground. And I want to also point out, this is not some sieve of an offensive line for Washington. This is a very good offensive line. They are this year's Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. Michigan won that award the 2 previous years. This year, Washington holds that award, and there's a lot of pride on this offensive line, and they are very good. They're also very good at tackle. They're solid on the interior. That's where I believe Texas could have taken advantage. The issue for Texas is their ability to cover on the back end when Penix was able to sidestep pressure. Again, Michigan, they are not Texas. I think they can absolutely get to Penix. I think the question is his ability to shake off that pressure like he did against Texas and still make elite level throws in the same way. His accuracy, like I mentioned before, it's at a CJ Stroud level. It's a Joe Burrow level right now. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he just plays out of his mind once again. And that's how Washington is able to beat Michigan at the end of the day. Now, as far as the Michigan offense versus the Washington defense is concerned in this matchup, Michigan, they will need to control the football. You have to lean on Blake Corum. You have to limit offensive possessions for Washington. I think against the Washington defense, you can implement more Donovan Edwards in the run game. I think he's going to have to be a factor as well. I believe there's going to be a lot more holes and opportunities for Edwards to exploit this Washington defense than what he was able to do against Alabama when he did get a chance. Ultimately, though, it's going to be Blake Corum's elite vision. It's going to be the Michigan offensive line playing its best football of the year. They have to match their performance, the similar performance that they had against Alabama. They have to bring it in this national championship game. If they can do that, it's going to be a long night for that Washington defense. And one key data point to think about heading into this one, Washington is one of the worst tackling teams in college football. They are 105th in PFF tackling grade. In fact, this is Braylon Trice's biggest weakness. He has 27 missed tackles on the season. I expect Michigan will go right at him, not only to keep him on his heels as a pass rusher, but to try and exploit his bad tackling. The corners are also weak at tackling. I feel like Michigan's quick perimeter throw game, the screens to Samaj Morgan and Cornelius Johnson are going to be massive opportunities. I think also when you throw it to any of the receivers, Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson, Samaj Morgan, the tight ends out there, if you're unable to get them on the ground and there's a ton of yards after catch, that's a huge opportunity for the Michigan offense and just bad news for the Washington defense if they're unable to get them down. If the run game is on point, Michigan will have to make them pay when they run play action against a vulnerable Husky secondary that ranks 120th in 20-plus yard pass plays allowed this year. That means J.J. McCarthy will need to be prepared to hit these throws at the intermediate and deep level to keep the defense honest throughout this game. If and when Michigan gets behind schedule, the Michigan offensive line will also have to track Braylon Trice on the edge. Michigan will have to keep an eye on him. They'll probably have to put an extra body on him throughout the game in key passing situations because all it's going to take in this game, if this game is going to be a shootout for Washington and they need to get some key stops here and there, all it's going to take is a strip sack or a pressure that affects a throw that becomes a pick or a pick six. That could change the whole outlook of the game in a key situation. So if Washington is going to have success on defense, it's going to begin and end with Braylon Trice as a pass rusher. So they're going to have to get Michigan into those obvious passing situations for him to be a factor. Now, as I mentioned, they allow a lot of 20-plus yard pass plays. They have to minimize this. They can do this by keeping Michigan off schedule. That means they have to stop the run on early downs and force Michigan into obvious pass downs. That's going to be easier said than done for a defense allowing 4.4 yards per rush attempt this season. They just gave up 180 yards to Texas. They just need to bend, but not break. They need to make it difficult for Michigan in red zone situations. They can win this game if they can force Michigan to settle for 3 instead of 6 consistently. Unfortunately, the data and the film tell us Washington struggles to stop teams in the red zone. They allow teams to score a touchdown on 70% of their red zone opportunities. That ranks 117th nationally, and all of Texas's points in the semifinal matchup with Washington occurred in the red zone. Washington only has 1 week to prepare for Michigan. They're not going to be able to fix that in the course of 1 week. So that's my perspective on this matchup. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Who do you think is going to win this game? Will it be the Michigan Wolverines winning their first full national title since 1948? If you remember, 1997 was a shared title, although I believe Michigan beats Nebraska anyway. Or will it be the Washington Huskies who prevail and win their first national title since 1991, which was also shared? Their only other national title was back in 1960. You can reply in the comments section. Will it be Michigan? Will it be Washington? Don't hold back out there. Let us know your thoughts and how you see this thing playing out. That's going to do it for today's episode previewing the Michigan versus Washington National Championship matchup. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for a post-national championship analysis video next week. And then after that, we're going to go back into the full NFL draft analysis mode leading up to the 2024 NFL draft. I want to say thanks again for watching and stay tuned for more great content in the coming weeks and months.